This engine cost $400 less than the Hemi. It beat it anyway. For 50 years, Mopar people have argued about which engine actually ran quicker in the real world. One had the name, the other had the time slips. Chrysler never wanted this comparison printed. Here's why. The 426 Hemi elephant motor, two 4-barrel carbs stacked like a dare, 425 horsepower on paper. Every muscle car kid in 1969 knew that number cold. But that number was gross horsepower. No accessories, no exhaust restriction, a lab fantasy. Net, installed, with mufflers on. Real-world testers clocked it closer to 350. That gap is the whole scandal, and almost nobody outside the trade press ever saw it. The Hemi also weighed more. Two 4-barrels, a stiffer valve train, a price tag north of $800 as an option. Insurance companies noticed the name Hemi. Premiums climbed, buyers walked. Chrysler needed an answer that didn't scream Hemi on the paperwork. Enter the 446-pack. 3 2-barrel Hollies, one purpose. Rated at 390 horsepower gross, 15 shy of the pack. On paper, a lesser engine. On the strip, that 15 horsepower gap disappeared, and sometimes it reversed. Here's the number Chrysler didn't put in the brochure. The 446-pack weighed roughly 75 pounds less than the twin-carb Hemi setup. 75 pounds off the nose of a car at wide-open throttle is not nothing. It's the difference between a car that hooks and a car that wheelies into a slower 60-foot time. Car Life tested a 446-pack Roadrunner in 1969, 13.5 seconds, 105 miles per hour. That same year, several Hemi Roadrunners in street trim ran times right in that same window, sometimes slower. The engine with less advertised horsepower was running with the engine that had a cult following. This is where the record gets murky, and where Mopar's own marketing made it worse. Chrysler wanted the Hemi as the flagship. The 6-pack was supposed to be the budget option. Nobody was allowed to say it was faster. So test numbers that made the 6-pack look too good got buried in back pages or not run at all. You don't advertise that your $600 option beats your $800 option. The 440's advantage starts with torque, 490 pound-feet at low RPM versus the Hemi's 490 at a much higher RPM. The Hemi needed revs to make its case. The 440 made its case the instant your foot hit the floor. On a street tune, with a street driver, that torquey curve wins more often than the spec sheet admits. The Hemi rewarded a skilled driver who could keep it in the narrow power band. Most buyers weren't that driver. The 446-pack forgave mistakes. It pulled hard from idle to redline without a demanding shift point. That's not a small thing. That's the difference between a magazine's best time and a customer's actual Tuesday night run. Now, the numbers Chrysler really didn't want compared side by side. Compression. Hemi at 10.25 to 1. 6-pack at 10.5 to 1. The cheaper engine ran hotter compression. Displacement. 440 cubic inches versus 426. 14 extra cubic inches of raw grunt the Hemi never had. Carburation. The Hemi's cross-ram dual quads looked violent but choked airflow at certain RPM bands. The 6-pack's progressive triple carb setup didn't. Only the center carb ran at idle and cruise. The outer two opened under load. That's efficiency the Hemi's setup didn't have. Production numbers tell their own story. Chrysler built roughly 10 times more 6-pack cars than Hemi cars that year. Not because the Hemi was rare by design alone. Because most buyers, when they actually drove both, picked the one that launched straighter and cost less to insure. This is the part of the story the Hemi mythology skips. Let's go to the strip. Because spec sheets settle arguments in bar rooms, time slips settle them everywhere else. 1970, Superstock and Drag Illustrated ran back-to-back tests of a 446-pack Roadrunner and a factory 426 Hemi Coronet. The 6-pack ran a 13.81 at 104 miles per hour. The Hemi, in comparable street trim, ran a 13.95, 1400ths slower, in stock street configuration. 1400ths doesn't sound like much until you remember this is the engine that cost $400 more. Chrysler's own engineers weren't shocked. Internally, some had argued for years that the 440 was the smarter street engine. The Hemi was never built to be the best street racer. It was built to win NASCAR superspeedways and homologate for that world. It needed to survive 500 miles at 8,000 RPM. The 440 needed to survive a stoplight and a quarter mile. Different jobs entirely. That distinction got lost the moment marketing slapped Hemi on a streetcar hood scoop. The name carried weight the street tune couldn't always cash. Car and Driver's 1970 comparison test put it bluntly in language the factory hated. The six-pack was, quote, quicker off idle and easier to drive fast. That sentence never made it into a single Chrysler dealer brochure. Now, to be fair to the elephant motor, a properly tuned, properly driven Hemi could and did run quicker than any 440. With headers, slicks, and a driver who understood the power band, low 12-second Hemi runs existed. That's real, that's documented. But the title isn't about the modified best-case Hemi. It's about what left the factory and what a real buyer actually drove home. In stock street trim, on street tires, with a street driver, the record repeatedly favors the six-pack. That's the verdict. Say it plainly, the 446 pack was the better street engine, not close to the Hemi, better than it. Three dimensions prove it: cost, weight, and quarter-mile time in stock trim. Cost, roughly $250 to $400 cheaper depending on the model year and trim. Weight, around 75 pounds lighter over the front axle, translating directly into better 60-foot times. Time, quicker in nearly every documented stock versus stock magazine test from 1969 through 1971. 3 for 3. That's not a coincidence. That's an engine built smarter for the one job that actually mattered to most buyers. So why does the Hemi still get the poster on the wall? Because rarity and mythology sell better than a torque curve. Chrysler built the Hemi in tiny numbers, and scarcity became legend. A numbers-matching 1970 Hemi Roadrunner convertible sold at auction in 2014 for $1.8 million. A comparable 446-pack car from the same year, same body, same condition, sells for a fraction of that, sometimes under a tenth. The market doesn't price performance, it prices rarity and a name stamped on a fender. That's the real cover-up here, not a conspiracy. A market that rewarded the name and buried the timing tape. 1971 was the last year for both engines in this form. Insurance surcharges and emissions rules were closing in fast. By 1972, compression dropped across the board. Neither engine as built in 1970 would ever exist again in that form. The window where this argument could even happen was maybe 3 model years wide. Every real comparison test that exists comes from that narrow window. That's why the data is thin and the myths are thick. Today, restoration shops will tell you the same thing the 1970 testers found. A well-tuned 446-pack keeps pace with a stock Hemi and costs a quarter as much to build. Mopar collectors quietly know this. They just don't say it loud at the Hemi Guys car show booth. The Hemi earned its legend on the superspeedway. The 446-pack earned its verdict on the street, where the actual buyers lived. Both stories are true. Only one of them was ever allowed on the brochure. So the next time someone tells you the Hemi automatically wins, ask them for the time slip. Not the poster, the time slip. If you drove one of these cars, or your father did, tell us the real number it ran. Not the number on the fender, the one on the tree. That's the verdict, backed by the sheets nobody wanted printed. Subscribe for the next case we settle with real numbers, not folklore. Let's talk about what happened after the tree, because the verdict on paper isn't the whole story. There's a second court, and it convened at auction. A numbers-matching 426 Hemi Charger sold for over $350,000 in 2023. A documented 446-pack Roadrunner, same year, same condition tier, brought in around $90,000. That's not a small gap. That's 4 times the money for an engine that the time slips say didn't run 4 times faster. So what are collectors actually buying? Not lap times. Mythology. The name Hemi carries 50 years of NASCAR banning it, of magazines worshiping it. The six-pack never got banned from anything. Nobody wrote a rule to stop it. And in this hobby, getting outlawed is worth more than getting respected. That's the second verdict. On the strip, it's close, sometimes a six-pack win. On the auction block, the Hemi wins every single time, and it isn't close. Chrysler knew this before the ink dried on the brochures. The Hemi option cost $600 more in 1969. $600 for a car that ran the same quarter mile. They weren't selling horsepower. They were selling the right to say you had one. That's a different product, and it needs a different verdict. Here's the number almost nobody quotes: insurance data from 1969. Hemi cars got canceled by underwriters at triple the rate of six-pack cars. Not because the Hemi was faster in a straight line, because teenagers who bought Hemis drove like they'd already won the argument. That's not physics, that's psychology, and it killed people. By 1971, insurers had surcharged both engines into near extinction. The six-pack got dropped quietly. The Hemi got dropped loudly, with magazine eulogies. Same funeral, different headstones. That's the part the fender badge never told you. One engine died as a statistic, the other died as a legend. The dyno sheet never asked for the difference. Today, restoration shops will tell you the same thing off camera. A correct Hemi build runs $60,000 easy. A correct six-pack build runs half that. Parts scarcity, not performance, sets that price. There were fewer Hemi blocks cast to begin with. Scarcity is the real engine under both these hoods now. So when someone tells you the Hemi is simply the better car, ask them better at what? Quarter mile, it's a coin flip some nights. Ledger and legend, no contest. That's three verdicts now, stacked on the table. The strip says close. The market says Hemi, decisively. The insurance files say both cars scared the same men in suits. Nobody puts all three verdicts in one place. Car shows sell you nostalgia. Auction houses sell you provenance. We just sell you what actually happened. Somewhere there's a barn with a 446 pack under a tarp, undervalued because the fender doesn't say Hemi. Its time slip doesn't know that, it just knows what it ran. If you own that car, you're not sitting on a lesser machine. You're sitting on the best kept secret in muscle car math, and one day the market catches up to the math. We're not done with these two. Next case reopens the $600 question: what you were really buying when you paid for the name on the fender.